social pastor, I was there with him. What shot address in local? What shot address from Milan? Excuse me, sir.
Mo gbàdúrà yẹn fún ẹnìkan ní tó ń bá máa tẹ̀wọ̀n ní tó ń wo di president kí n jẹ́ kó wò.
Lẹ́nu ẹgbàá ni wà ń bẹ̀ ẹlẹ́fẹ́ lọ rí àlejàlẹ̀ mo ní mo fẹ́ kọ́ lọ kún kí mi náà.
Ìwọ ọmọ òkè àwọn àdúgbò kò ní rí bí níbi tí ayé sáà ó ti mọ̀ ọ́ ṣe mọ́ ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ ní
Refinery, 650,000 tons of capacity.
650,000 tons of capacity plus a petrochemical complex.
And we've got a fertilizer complex nearby.
Nearby, 3 million tons.
How do you feel that you pulled this off?
I feel great. I feel very proud as an African doing this.
But people were questioning whether you could do it. We just saw the bill rising, the price tag rising, rising.
Nobody ever expected us to pull this through. A lot of people have given up, but we've been able to deliver.
So you said it was going to be $14 billion?
Yes,
and now,
at the beginning, but
they
are quite a lot. Now about 19 billion almost. 19
billion.
Yes.
And you had to become a construction company and
we had to become construction. We are the engineering, the procurement and construction contractor. So all the others are actually just subcontractors.
So if you knew,
so we built it.
You built it, but if you like what you know now, would you do it again? Would you have done it, knowing how hard it was going to be?
Actually, you know, yes, if I'm going to do it now, I will do it better.
Yeah. Because
I've learned from experience. But if I knew what I was going to go through, I wouldn't have tried.
You wouldn't have tried?
No,
but people warned you, don't do this.
They did, but I thought they were just trying to discourage me, you know, but I've done that. There are other countries in Africa that, all the African countries that have been trying to build refineries, they have not been able to. There has not been a refinery in the last 35 years.
And I wonder why that is. Why do you think that is?
So many issues.
Tell me.
There are many. I can't count them, but there are so
Is it
much.
Money? Is it political will?
It's not only the money, money, political will, and also people who are benefiting from this whole stuff of importing petroleum products into Africa are actually discouraging those governments from building a refinery. And, you know, they won't get the loans anyway, because they don't have very strong banks. The international banks will not support anything like this.
You're a true African industrialist and you've achieved so much.
Yes.
We're talking about industrializing the continent, creating a more connected Africa.
Yeah.
Do you believe that can be done?
I think it can be done, but we have to make sure we focus and say that, look, we are the only ones that can deliver. We Africans are the only people that can develop Africa. If we are waiting for foreigners or foreign investors to come and develop Africa, it will never happen.
So what's next for you now? What are you going to do next? You've bought a lot of cranes, so you've got to put them to work.
Yeah, we will keep looking at the next opportunities, petrochemicals, upstream. We will look at those opportunities and keep flying. The sky is the limit.
God of our heroes. grant us the grace of your Holy Spirit. Guide our speakers and help us to be open to what they are saying. May we not just be hearers of the good points they be raising, but may we also be doers of what we are expected to do. As we discuss Nigeria, we pray in a special way for our rulers, and we ask you to transform them into leaders. We pray, O Lord, that you free them from self, free them from greed, free them from narrow-mindedness. May they think about the good of their people. May they think about the future generation of children and youths in this country. And may we all be willing to make all the sacrifices we need to make this country great. Bless all that we shall do here today and make it impactful through Christ our Lord, Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Years since the founder, Professor Pat Utomi, started activities to protect and support oppressed poor widows, and 25 years since he started the TV program, Patito's Gang. It takes grace to come as far down the road as we have come at CVL. But we traveled on the wings of many, so many, that a fair extension of gratitude, one by one, is not practical. But let me select a few of our annual lecture speakers, chairmen, and facilitators of some of our cherished programs as point of contact to those we owe so much. The CVL Kickoff Program was a role model forum, and it is noteworthy that the first speaker was the then Deputy Managing Director of Guinness Nigeria PLC, Ekunife Okoli. The role model forum was designed to get upwardly mobile young executives to share with young people the values that got them to the top. Mr. Okoli told the amazing story of him as a young person in Guinness at a time of scarcity, when to post a man out to the east was to spoil him with offers of inducements from distributors and retailers. While his colleagues lobbied for such positions, he turned it down for a good place in branding so that he could better learn the business. That choice will catapult his career when the season of product scarcity ended. Through the years, speakers at the RMF included Harish Aswani of the Toleram Group, Kevin Balogun of Coca-Cola, Chinenye Mbauzoku, Hamid Joda of Taj Bank, and so many others. The other program designed to both celebrate honorees and learn from them and learn about the sector they were active in is the Leader Without Title, LWT Tribute Colloquium Series. And it was inspired by the Canadian Robin Sharma's famous book, The Leader Who Had No Title. Many are the people whose lives have been impacted in 15 years of LWT at CVL, as we honored more than 100 leaders, from Mr. Akintola Williams, Dikin Gamaliel Onosode, Izoma Philip Asiodu, who is here with us today, Alhaji Ahmed Joda, Dr. Michael Omolayole, Chief Ato Mbanefu, Mrs. Toyin Olakunrin, Professor Mrs. Elebute, Dr. Christopher Kolade, Engineer Mrs. Maduka, and Chief Emeka Anyoku, who is also here present, amongst others. I'm personally even more proud of the LWT subset on women who broke the glass ceiling. And this included and honored women like Dr. Mrs. Tokumbo Awolowo Dosumu, Ambassador Hadiza Mustafa, and Ambassador Adenike Ukonga. Just as worthy of our gratitude are those who have made the talk fest we are having today top of the public lecture calendar offering in the country. Our past chairmen include heads of state, General Yakubu Gowon, President Olusegun Obasanjo, Chief Joseph Sanusi, former governor of Central Bank, former Governor Babatunde Fashola, and speakers including President Kagame of Rwanda and George Okonwe of Liberia, U.S. Congressman Jerry Weller, Bishop Matthew Hassan Kuka, Vice President Yemi Oshibajo, Professor Ibrahim Gambari. Such other programs, such as the Young Entrepreneurs Training Program, YETP, the Nigerian History Series, and the Youth Bootcamp, are ample selections from what underlies the impact God enabled us to have. We're indeed truly grateful to all these people. In my time of full work as a professor at the College of Medicine, University of Lagos, my goal is to enhance smiles. And I find that the many CVL programs do put smiles on many faces. I feel that as a double-barrel achievement. And so on that note, I once again warmly welcome you all and wish us all a very enlightening and fulfilling day. Thank you very much.
Special sense of appropriateness of this moment. Today is a time of Thanksgiving, it's a time for stock taking. But in taking stock, it is important to recognize that there is good and there is bad in this world. But our purpose is what really matters. Our purpose is to be co-creators with God, moving creation towards its perfection. And all the effort that has come through in trying to run all the programs that CVL has run, it's about how to make for a better world so that those who come after us will have a more noble humanity. And in going through that this morning, I want to say that my remarks are written down in this little magazine brochure that is with you, and you can read it at your leisure. There's plenty to read in it. Actually, this is a collector's item. Please keep it and read every word that is printed there. But really, truly, what I wanted to focus on is that in spite of all that seems bad, there's so much good that has been done in this country. And some of those who have done that good are in this room. And we want to salute them. I take an example, a very simple example. There's a book that I have just written. It took me 45 years to write that book, believe it or not. Yes, I've written many books. This one started getting written when I was a young graduate student. It was completed only a few weeks ago and will be upgraded in less than 4 weeks from now because it's all happening so quickly. Our country, and Professor Ubu will speak to that book in a few minutes, but our country has been challenged not because people are wicked. It's challenged mainly because people are ignorant and they don't make the effort to learn enough to do what's good for even themselves. The many people we think are horrible people who will find out that what they thought they were doing in self-interest or for selfish reasons actually is loading a gun and shooting themselves in the foot. But they're not knowledgeable enough to realize that's what they are doing. And that's what the big tragedy of the Nigerian condition is. A very simple opportunity, but let me just take an opportunity to say thank you to many who have done their work well. Tribute to men who have been shining light, like Chimemeka Anyaoku, for example. This country has depended on oil and gas, for example, for a long time. Biggest success as enterprise goes in this country, perhaps our continent, it's a company called Nigeria LNG. That company may not have happened if someone like Izoma Philip Asiodu, who is sitting here, did not start a certain process. But even more so, it would not have happened if somebody like Don Etchebet had not done some remarkable things. And there's a case study I've written on that is in the book that we're going to present today. This is the most successful company. Anybody who disputes it can challenge me in our country. And it's a government partnership with private sector. The possibilities of Nigeria are infinite if we could just think a little bit. Put on the patriot's garb. Put on the garment of love. Because leadership is all about love. If you can't love, you can't lead. To love is to lead. Our goal really is to build a civilization of love. If we can build it, we will have a great country. We will be a successful people and we'll have peace. Thank you. Welcome.
Humility, gentility, and action. I used to visit him when he was the governor in a cottage house, he with his beautiful wife. And it was there that he developed and built the new Akwa Ibom that you all see. Architect Obom Victor Attar is the architect of the new Akwa Ibom. And then he did so well that today we saw the other governors who consolidated and replicate what he has done. Sir, you are welcome and thank you very much for what you have done to the people of Akwa Ibom. And we are so proud of you, sir. Thank you very much. Please, another round of applause for him, please.
Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you. Today we have come to launch a book that I believe will provide solutions for some of the problems that we have always had opportunity to analyze. But before we do that, we are going to have a lecture. And the topic of the lecture is democracy, governance, and national performance, the mutual relationship. Within the lecture, we are expected to discuss power, politics, public process, and performance. And I would like to add people, because all of these are aimed at getting us a better country, a better people in the world, particularly in our country. We have always had analysis of our problems, but sometimes we shy away from preferring solutions. And when those solutions have been brought forward, we are not able to implement them. Maybe the time has come for us to realize that unless we take some positive action, nothing will happen. We'll continue to grumble and the situation will only get worse. It is not my place to provide the lecture today, but I know that in politics, perhaps it is in politics that the saying that power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely is very true. It is in politics that absolute power will corrupt to the point that, in fact, the person exercising the power does not know his excesses anymore. He takes it as the norm. And that sort of absolutism has no place in democracy. So today, we must concentrate on democratic principles and insist that our country follows them. And of course, the primary basis of democracy is elections. We have to find a way of getting our elections right. Unless and until we are able to put the people we want in office and able to remove them when we are dissatisfied with their performance, we will remain where we are. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my hope and my expectation that both the book and the lecture will give us the solution to some of the problems we want to solve in this country. Thank you very much for coming.
So welcome, and I'm very pleased to be here. In fact, this is a homecoming for me. It's been a few years because of COVID and other interruptions since I've been in Nigeria, and it's wonderful to be back. And I'm deeply grateful to Professor Pat Utomi for inviting me to deliver this keynote lecture. And I'm really pleased for the opportunity to speak with you today. It's a very distinguished and thoughtful group, reflecting on crucial issues at an urgent time. And I'm really pleased and honored to be included. I'm also especially grateful and appreciative that Professor Utomi began with an appreciation for so many people in the room who represent a better direction for the country and who have given so much to the political and economic advancement of Nigeria, because some of what I'm going to say is quite critical of developments in the country, and we need to appreciate that there are ways forward and people who can bring it forward. So let me begin by making a few remarks. Let's see if we can do this. Does that work? This is not working. Okay, there we go. Let me see if we can begin with a few remarks on questions of democracy, development, and I'm going to raise the issue of violence in Nigeria. These thoughts are prompted by a central puzzle that's increasingly been apparent in recent years. There we go. A central puzzle that has been increasingly apparent in recent years. Nigeria has achieved a political milestone. The Fourth Republic has endured as a civilian electoral regime, and indeed the longest regime of any type in the nation's post-independence history. We have just gone through a 7th election cycle since 1999 with a constitutional transition of government, and in the history of the Fourth Republic, a peaceful turnover from one presidential incumbent to another and from one ruling party to another. Democracy has been more resilient in Nigeria than many of us would have expected if we think back 25 years. And yet, Nigeria has also become increasingly violent in the past 2 decades, with multiple insurgencies, communal conflicts, land disputes, and widespread criminal activity. It is fair to say that the country now faces a general crisis of security, as government cannot provide basic protection for much of the population or territory. Why is this so? The current dilemma was not inevitable. During the democratic transition, for which I was privileged to be here during those very hopeful founding elections in 1999, Nigerians looked forward to political freedoms, democratic representation, and a greater possibility for shared prosperity. Conflict seemed to be a symptom of the corruption and unaccountability of military rule, with democracy as an attractive possibility for greater peace. And there were many reasons to share this optimism at that time. Comparative experience around the world tells us that democracies can be more successful in meeting popular demands, in allowing for political choice, and in providing options for negotiations and compromise. The world's strongest democracies are also among the world's most stable countries. Other large federal democracies have seen episodes of conflict resolution and greater stability after grappling with their own periods of intense unrest. India had a great deal of turbulence in the 1980s and 90s, from insurgencies, political violence, and regional clashes, religious clashes, yet violence has been trending downward in India steadily for 25 years. Indonesia had a huge upsurge in conflict, a secessionist movement, and terrorist challenges at the time of their 1999 transition, the same year as Nigeria. Yet within a few years, they had achieved much greater stability. South Africa experienced intense political violence during the time of the 1994 transition, yet conflict subsided rapidly after the founding elections that brought Nelson Mandela to office. In Nigeria, we have seen instead an escalation and widening of violence across the country. And I'm just going to review what is probably very clear in most people's minds, but we should recall how these things have unfolded. Consider the key episodes of insecurity over the past decades. At the time of the political transition, we had a flurry of local conflicts in Lagos and Kano, Kaduna, Shagamu, Ile-Ife, Modakeke, Kafanchan, and other spots. When governors in the northern states expanded Sharia codes in many of the 12 of the northern states, we saw religious tensions escalate. Then beginning around 2004, we began to see an insurgency in the Niger Delta with the Niger Delta People's Volunteer Force and then the movement for the emancipation of the Niger Delta. This was contained through an offensive and through an amnesty in 2009, but at exactly the same moment, unfortunately, we began to see an upsurge in violence in the north with Boko Haram. And that has been complicated by the emergence of the Islamic State West African province. Then, after 2016, we see an escalation of the herder-farmer conflicts. At about the same time, there is a revival of the New Biafra movement, and there is violence in the eastern states. And now, certainly since 2016, 2017, we see growing criminality and banditry across the country. So it's useful to think again, just remind ourselves how these things have unfolded in different phases and different places. So the question then becomes for us, how do we account for this history? Violence and conflict in Nigeria are not driven by a single group. They're not driven by a single grievance, a core division, or a simple underlying problem such as poverty and resources. There are many different types of instability unfolding around the country. So we need to think that perhaps there is a more general problem of political inclusion, government legitimacy, and economic attainment for large parts of the population. The problem of security in the Fourth Republic is a problem of democratic incorporation and state performance. Oops. There we go. So I want to make 3 quick points and then conclude, because when the speaker says to conclude, this is everybody's favorite part of the speech. But I do want to make these 3 points quickly. First, the nature of the elite democratic bargain in the Fourth Republic has worked against broader representation across the Federation. Secondly, this same bargain has not fostered adequate economic development and broad-based economic growth, what we generally call shared prosperity. There is a severe democratic deficit in economic development in the Fourth Republic. And third, a divided elite and a marginalized population have turned too often to violent tactics in the struggle for resources and for identity. So let me quickly review each of these points. The Fourth Republic represents an historic bargain. Recall the 3 grand bargains in Nigerian history. The first was the independence bargain of 1959. It led to the First Republic, which unfortunately and tragically ended in military intervention and civil war. The second grand bargain at the conclusion of the Civil War was a focus by military and civilian elites to maintain national unity. That led to federalism, and it was facilitated by oil revenues in the first oil boom. We are now in the third grand bargain in Nigerian history, the Fourth Republic. After 40 years of failed democracy and military interventions and predatory military rule, elites agreed in 1999 to try to implant a durable democracy. This democracy has been resilient. And this is what is critical about the current moment. But the third bargain has lasted for 25 years, but still it has contained important flaws. Much of the bargain for the Fourth Republic has been negotiated by the three central minority groups from the north, from the southeast, from the southwest, who have dominated politics since 1959. The idea of the power shift, the idea of zoning, these were essentially bargains between the three big groups. Federal character adds some token inclusion, but many minorities are not in the tent. What are the central problems arising from this narrow coalition? First, we see, as the governor has reflected, the lack of institutionalized parties that could have national reach. The party system in Nigeria has shifted between dominant parties with a limited base, but with few durable links to voters or communities. Think about the political parties in Nigeria, including the dominant and the ruling parties who have governed. They have changed their name, they have reorganized, they have shifted their affiliations with, again, as Governor Atta has cited, elections that are often not free and fair, and party affairs that are often not democratic. The point is that citizens and voters in many parts of the country lack a strong stake in the current system. And indeed, the parties are often transactional, as politicians compete over the distribution of rents and spoils. Political parties do not project clear ideologies or party programs. As a result, the parties do not have strong voter coalitions beyond their regional support. This gives rise to a crucial problem of exclusion. For many groups at the political margins in Nigeria, they don't have a voice through the party system or through elections to the political establishment. They don't have access to power or policy. Without fair elections, accountable legislators, or responsive party organizations, substantial groups of citizens experience political disaffection. Electoral violence and low turnout are just two symptoms of this syndrome. This leads to a second problem. The first is some of the political problems that arise from the compact of the Fourth Republic, but also the failure of development, or the shortcomings of development, should be noted. There is, in the current political dispensation, a type of what I will call an elite card. It works at cross purposes with economic development. And here I want to acknowledge a long lineage of scholars and analysts who have pointed to the problem of political capture, the problem of political logic working at cross purposes with development. There's Richard Joseph and the emphasis on pre-Bendel politics, the late Professor Claude Ake, who has argued that there is a political logic that diverges from development. My own work on the comparison between some Southeast Asian countries and Nigeria that looks at the possibility of a developmental ethos in countries that are diverse, some countries that have a Muslim majority in difficult territory and difficult circumstances. Professor Utomi's many writings, but particularly his book, his recent memoir, Why Not, which really reflects about political capture and elite politics in Nigeria. Zainab Usman's observations about political settlements and the nature of the political settlement working at cross purposes with development. And the Professor Omano Edigeji's important book, Democracy Without Development in Nigeria. Each of these authors has raised a central dilemma. Durkin reminds us is a crucial foundation for political change. So the simple takeaway point here is that Nigeria's shortcomings in economic development represent a core political problem. A core problem of the political class that, as the way it functions as a whole. Even with the many good people in this room who have made impressive efforts to advance Nigeria, we know that as a class and as a grouping, the political elite has not delivered. Let's recall that the Fourth Republic followed an extremely pernicious era of military rule that led to economic stagnation, global isolation, and yes, that's what I want, and a sharp rise in poverty. Some of those issues improved quickly under civilian rule. There was definitely an inflection point and a significant improvement after the dark years of the Abacha dictatorship and the arrival of a democratic dispensation. And it improved even more with the arrival of a new petroleum windfall in 2002, which opened dramatic possibilities for growth and diversification. And indeed, for a time, the country did see a reduction in external debt. It did see rapid economic growth, diminishing rates of poverty, expansion of non-oil activities in finance, in telecommunications, information technologies, media, entertainment, and we know that today Nigeria structurally on paper is no longer an oil economy in terms of relative output. We know that finance and ICT produce more in Nigeria in terms of national output than oil and gas. But the country still operates, obviously, in a political economy of oil and gas, which is very central to the operations of the state. And indeed, let's look to the larger truths. Because of population growth, there are more poor people in Nigeria today than there were in 2000, despite lower poverty rates. So you see the poverty rate goes from about 43% in 2000 to about 30% today, which looks very hopeful, but Nigeria is a rapidly growing country. So the population estimates are, in terms of poverty, that there were 70 million people in poverty in 2016, 88 million Nigerians in extreme poverty in 2022, and over 100 million people today. This has to be a central fact that is acknowledged and is at the core of what we are all grappling with. Because of the youth bulge, unemployment remains stubbornly high, with many estimates well over 30%. Because many of the new and promising and diversifying economic activities in Nigeria are non-tradable and they have limited employment effects, they do not contribute to wider prosperity across the country. And economic transition to manufacturing and greater rural productivity still eludes Nigeria. And of course, we've seen that after the upsurge of economic growth with the last oil windfall, we see a rapid increase in GDP per capita in the early 2000s, but then that has come down and it turned negative during the post-2015 era because of lower oil prices and weaker oil markets. Coming back just a little bit now, but still not where it was earlier in the decade. Finally, we come to the problem of stability. Let me just make one more point about the economy, that the economic downturn of the last decade has not only reduced incomes, but that government has been unable to make critical investment in infrastructure. And we know that one of the elements, without going through the full menu of problems that are familiar to many people, one of the elements is the crucial bottleneck, the binding constraint of energy, of electricity. This is the hindrance to Nigeria's forward advancement. And when other countries have unlocked this problem, the economy moves. It is the binding constraint on the Nigerian economy, and all we have seen in the last 25 years is plans, misallocated funds, and low delivery. So this is a crucial problem. So economic marginality, the low gains of economic growth has overlapped with this problem of political exclusion to fuel the sources of violence. And here we see from some World Bank figures an indicator that they used for political stability and absence of violence or terrorism. And all that this should show us is that during the Second Republic, Nigeria has remained in very low percentiles. Now, everybody here has taken a standardized exam to gain entry to school. So we know that a low percentile is not good. You want to be in the upper percentile in any relative scale. And here Nigeria has gone between 9, 7, 2, consistently low. And at the very last section, I just want to give you the contrast with where a couple...
My very good friend, I want to thank you for so many years of friendship. But I also want to congratulate you on this wonderful day because 28 years ago, when you turned 40, you gave me an opportunity to receive the baptism as a public intellectual, because we used your 40th birthday to test the waters of public debate, and we've come a long way. But of course, you have been the senior prefect in all of this, and I want to congratulate you. 68 years, not too bad, nice try, but we elders have to do what elders must do, namely to encourage their young ones. I'm sorry I'm unable to be with you physically, but as you know, emotionally I'm with you. But even more importantly, we have prayed and we pray for you for this wonderful day. But we would like to thank God for what you have accomplished and what you've meant and what you still mean to us in our country and Africa at large. We celebrate your wonderful gifts, but also most importantly that we have placed these gifts before Nigerians. And I want to assure you that your contributions have helped to shape this country in more ways than you can understand. Of course, naturally, we remain totally dissatisfied with the quality of progress that we have made, but I want to tell you that for many of us, your writings, your speeches, your energy and your strength have been a source of inspiration, but for those of us who are your seniors and those who are coming behind you. You have assembled a team of a wonderful team that will be having a conversation today. Of course, nobody would have expected anything different, because naturally we know that these are the kind of things you would do, rather than drinking champagne in some ballroom in a 5-star hotel somewhere in Lagos or Abuja. But this is you at your best. Well, I know that if we understand our country, the room will be full of people lamenting about how woefully we have performed. But But I like to look ahead, one as a man of faith, but also, quite frankly, to say that in very many ways, our situation may not be as horrible as we wanted to make it look, because there are in many dimensions we have. We're not where we're supposed to be, but we've not done too badly in many respects. And I think what we should be focusing on now are the great things that lie ahead and the possibilities of achieving those things. We have a much more robust environment for politics and debate and conversation. We may be failing in the areas of physical infrastructure and other indices of progress, such as insecurity. But as we can see, and I'm sure that as the speakers, one speaker after the other will testify, there will be those who are men and women of theory, and then of course, happily you brought in 3 illustrious governors who are doing their best, and I believe that their stories will also be pointers to where the country should be going. To them, a lot has been given, and to them we expect that this country will benefit. So I think that looking ahead, the indicators, don't give us a wonderful picture. But like I said, it is possible for this country to turn the corner. We need to renew our energy. We need to renew our greater commitment. And we hope that those who are in the business of governance can also appreciate the fact that without a much more refined set of navigational tools based on serious analysis of the defects of the structure that we call Nigeria, it will be difficult for us to continue to govern by happenstance. So I want to congratulate you and thank you in anticipation for this conversation, and we hope that we'll be able to see the fruits of this conversation. And what can I say? I wish you all the best, many more years. In 2 years' time, you will be 70. But remember, I will not be standing in one spot. I will still be ahead of you, because I'll be heading towards my own retirement. So once again, my dear friend, Pat, father, husband, friend, teacher, counselor, a very happy birthday. God bless you, and God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Bye-bye.
Okay, mine is to simply say thank you very much, and thanks immensely to my elder, senior brother, mentor, Professor Pato Twami, for the invitation. Unfortunately, I had confirmed some engagements outside of the country before now, so unfortunately I'm not able to join. I regret that. And mine is to simply, just 2-3 quick points. The first is to say a very happy birthday to you, elder brother, senior mentor, for this, happy 68th birthday. Yours has been 68 years of, how else to describe it, impactful life. Impactful life that has crisscrossed like a colossus around the country, and one that you have been involved. And I'm very excited because of this, the way you've chosen also to celebrate this 68th birthday presentation of this book. Because you've not just gone around the country speaking about the issues and the problems and the way to go, proffering solutions, but very importantly, and I think you've led very great examples, articulating these thoughts and proposals and ideas in book form, and keep getting involved. Participation is the key. Participation. And I do urge everyone who has something to offer, intellectually, by way of activism, by way of, in whatever form, just get involved, or you stop complaining. Because no nation, every country is a work in progress. Every society, development is a process. You never get to the end of it. But there must be constant contestations by the citizens, by various interest groups, and so on and so forth, towards a better society. And the life that you have lived, Professor Tommy, is an exemplary one, and which I recommend to others of us who have been in public service. I have about 11 titles I've been battling with to complete writing, but someday maybe we'll get this done. And for this, the book, unfortunately, I'm not able to participate in the panel, but I look forward to being able to pick at least 200, 250 copies of this. That will be my Easter gifts this period. That one, together with the one by our friend Osito Bu, maybe we'll put them in parts and circulate rather than hampers. We circulate these books. That is if people still read. Because unfortunately we're getting a new culture where people don't even open books to read. But I want to believe that it will be quite very thoughtful. I haven't had a chance to peruse through that, but I look forward to reading a copy myself. But just listening, just a quick footnote, listening to Professor Lewis and then, of course, the Central Cerebral Bishop Cooker, you know, the nuggets that I could pick from this. I think the point made by Bishop Cooker is very apt. Enough of the Book of Lamentations. Maybe it's now time to look at the glass half full, because all the time we're talking about what is wrong and the catalog of it. If you're a decision maker, after all the evils and so on, gloom and doom, where do we go from here? That's what a policymaker is asking for. In specific terms, what should I do? If you've got 2 minutes in front of a policymaker, he wants to know, in specific terms, what do I do to remedy this? And I think it's a big topic, very huge one, the title of the book that you have written. I remember the one when I saw the title of this, I just came up with the one that I co-edited with Paul Collier, Robert Bates, and so on, The Political Economy of Growth in Africa, for many decades, published in 2008. And I could see several of the themes coming up. But our fundamental challenge is really how we leapfrog, listening to Professor Lewis, how do we leapfrog from this predominantly transactional politics and governance into one that is transformational? And I think every society is in that spectrum at some point or the other, where they are, and the foundations that you need to have in place for this to happen. And for me, quite frankly, 2 key words that will help to connect the dots. Well, leadership is the obvious one. Everybody talks about leadership, whatever anyone means by that. But a key word that is missing, often not paid enough attention to, is institutions. Institutions. In Nigeria, more so often we refer to structure, as it were. Because no matter how skilled a Lionel Messi is as a footballer, if you take him and put him not in a regular, normal football field, but you put him in a cassava farm as a field, his skills may will completely disappear. And so, we need to pay a lot of attention to the institutions. I applied for this job because I believe, having served at the federal level, various institutions, the federal level, Chief Economic Advisor, Head of National Planning, Governor of Central Bank, and, you know, crisscrossing Abuja, I've come to a conclusion, very important one, that yes, we need an effective central government. But perhaps we need to get back again from below, bottom up. We need to fix the subnationals, as it were. But then the overarching institutional framework, which is the Constitution of Nigeria, requires a fundamental review. Unitary federalism that we are running, where we think we can run Nigeria, everything Nigeria from Abuja, it's simply not going to work, no matter how we try. Tech security, which Professor Lewis did at Dumbread. To think that the 71 or so thousand policemen controlled from Abuja will police the 225 million Nigerians out there, and the federal government is not even in a position to fund that, as it were, and we're still debating whether to have state police or that, and so on and so forth. It's not going to work. take the rule of law. Security, if you don't have security, law and order, and you think it's a judiciary that is so centralized that everything ends up in the Supreme Court, that if somebody steals a goat in one village, they can litigate that matter and it will end at the Supreme Court and take 20 years or 35 years to settle. Somebody comes to buy land in Nigeria and a foreign investor and is incumbent, they go to court. It must end at the Supreme Court. And so you have 20-something, 30-something thousand cases there at the Supreme Court with how many justices to deal with? There are fundamental issues about, and you want speedy dispensation of justice, rule of law, and so on and so forth. So we have quite a huge work to do about the super action institution. Of course, leadership is key, ultimately. We've seen that with America, that no matter the strength of the interaction between leadership and the institutions, when Trump tried to overturn the election, he would have succeeded if Mike Pence, if they didn't have strong institutions to resist him. And then the leadership by Mike Pence, for example, who refused to do his bidding. Otherwise, he would have succeeded. So, institutions are foundational to the progress of any society. And Semogolo and all the folks that we have in institution. But we also need good leaders who will even enforce them. As we've seen in the case of the Central Bank of Nigeria, we had excellent laws. We needed, the Supreme Court had to rise up, to stop the currency confiscation agenda, which was illegal. I superintended the 2007 Central Bank Act. I knew that that was illegal, the currency confiscation that was ongoing under the name of currency exchange. The Supreme Court had to, and with debilitating disastrous consequences for the macroeconomy, or the central bank going on beyond its legal remit in continuously printing money, 20-something trillion, backed by nothing. And today we are faced with all the massive inflation, depreciation of the exchange rate, and so on and so forth. The law said they couldn't do that. The law forbade that. But they did that. But there was no restraining institution. So you have this interaction between leadership and institutions. But I think we need to pay attention to both. Leadership matters, but also institutions, and noble leaders to ensure the enforcement of the legal and institutional framework in terms of execution. I can go on. I feel very passionate about this subject, but I know we haven't got all the time. But I wish you the very best of luck, my dear brother and mentor. I keep following every right and every pronouncement that you make. And my prayer on this your birthday is that God will continue to give you health and long life. And pray God Almighty to give us more millions more of autotomies in Nigeria. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
This is Your Royal Highness, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. When Pat Utomi asked me to be the book reviewer, he and I had a debate. One, he wasn't sure that I should do it. For some reason, he said that I am too implicated in the book. He had opened a chapter in the book with me and the stories I shared with him. And I had also written with Charles Soludo and Hajun Chang a book on the politics of policy making in Africa, which he quoted extensively. So he thought that there might be an issue. I had my own reasons for why I didn't think I should be the reviewer. I thought that to present part to the public might be an onerous task, and I may not have the energy and time. But at the end of the day, we agreed that there was no issue and that I was going to make this disclaimer up front. So, a couple of years ago, as a young senior program specialist in the Canadian International Development Research Center based in Nairobi, I was troubled that we were spending millions of dollars supporting research which claimed as the ultimate output influence on public policy. And then it dawned on me that we did not understand how policies were made. So if you were going to influence policy, what's your entry point? Where do you start? It led to me assembling African economists from several African countries, and we made a grant from the International Development Research Center. Professor Ludo was one of them, and a book came out on the politics of trade making. We learned a lot in the process, but we barely scratched the surface. We understand that even research has no linear relationship with policy making. There is what we call serendipity. You generate knowledge, you write a book, you may not know how they are going to be used. And in fact, there is a quick story that comes to mind. When I was still in that Nairobi, I had distributed another important book, Our Continent, Our Future, to almost all the ministers across the continent. And one day, one minister in Kenya called me up and said, Osita, can you send me additional copies of that book? I said, why? He said, I'll be using the arguments in the cabinet and my colleagues are not understanding. I need to share this knowledge with them. I was thrilled because as those who were funding research that should influence policy, here was one case that was happening and we didn't even know. So let me say that first thing you do when you're reviewing a book is also to establish the if you may like, authenticity of the author. Is he qualified to write what he's writing? Is he knowledgeable enough? Patu Tomi is an open book. He's a distinguished global intellectual grounded in theory and practice with academia, industry, public service, and NGO valid experiences. He's a public intellectual completely immersed in the nuances of Nigeria and indeed Africa development challenges, and this is very important, the emphasis on nuances. No one has spoken, written, and organized both the young and the old to champion value-laden leadership for Nigeria more than Patu Tomi. And he's still organizing. I think he's cooking up something, cooking up something. The beauty of his knowledge is that he's courageous enough to differ from mainstream orthodox views in the mold of a few Africans that I have categorized as African intellectual freedom fighters, those who are confident, knowledgeable, self-belief, willing to use that knowledge to liberate the continent. In addition to his knowledge, he has great understanding. It is in understanding that gives purpose and contextual relevance to knowledge. There is this story about a young, very bright economist who flew in from Washington to a very rural area in Africa. And he had this sophisticated model about how to improve farming. So he went to this old man and he was saying, you know these goats you have, if you import these feeds, do this, here is my model, you will multiply by 10, 30 times. And the old man listened as he was demonstrating in his fancy laptop. When he finished, the man pulled him aside and said, "Well, what I have are not goats, they are sheep." So the man had knowledge, he had no understanding. His knowledge did not have context. He couldn't make a distinction between goat and sheep. And so that model, of course, collapsed. The question, therefore, when Pat Utomi writes, as in this book, you will get unadulterated intellectual work infused with the right ideology in the mode of late Professor Claude Ake, who was insisting that Africa's development must be on our own robust, intelligent terms, and not on those borrowed from elsewhere. You can only question existing facts when you have read widely and can construct an alternative view. Prophet Tommy has, in his book, demonstrated his command of literature, both in depth and breadth. The starting point of this book is a construction of the framework, applied theoretical framework, if you like, to anchor the subsequent analysis that follow. I was giving a lecture one day and somebody said, Prof, ununa theory, you and your theory. I said, listen, theory is the foundation of practice, without which even the practice becomes a bit wobbly. So people must understand that these frameworks are essential in providing the boundary of analysis and for establishing the parameters that give meaning to the empiricism, case studies, and anecdotes that lead us to answer to the questions he has raised in the book. Every good book uses this chapter to achieve this, but Professor Tommy drove this further than most. Reading this chapter, I felt like a graduate student once again. Now I understand, because he said the book took 45 years. So it was actually a product of his graduate studies in Bloomington, Indiana. While acknowledging that there are many studies in public policy making, space, and state performance, he stated that the plethora of policy studies has yet to produce a framework that explains the nature relationship between high-level career public servants and politically elected or appointed officials in the process of formulating public policy, especially with regard to developing countries and Nigeria in particular. This work departs from others because Nigerians' experience can be broken into different, distinct epochs with distinct character, values, political and bureaucratic culture. And some of the players in this book are seated in this room, and they were quoted extensively. This is the strategic entry of this book. Engage the world, but engage the world with our own story, informed by our own experiences and complexities. The story, as told by Pat Utomi, is a collection of stories of key players as top political authorities and significant bureaucrats at various times in Nigerian political history. No one that I know has more access to heads of states, former heads of states, permanent secretaries, bureaucrats, more than Pat Utomi. So you can understand why this is an important book. And he spoke to quite a lot of them in trying to distill what the problems were and how policy making happened. The interviews, you know, these stories took readers right into the cabinet room, outside the cabinet room to listening posts as key players reveal motivations and incentives for action taken or not taken. The interviews and case studies robustly analyzed provide a rich menu of lessons. Surudo was talking about answers to the questions. You will find answers in the book. It's a journey that is not only revealing, but painfully sad, as we as a nation seem to have had several missed opportunities and have not learned from history. This book is therefore a history text, a text on the politics of policy making, and a book on the character of micro nuances that affect state performance. As I was reading the book, I was also reading a new book on China, the China Playbook Beyond Socialism and Capitalism by K. Eugene, London School of Economics, Professor of Economics. I introduce it here because this important book of China helped to illustrate the point I was making about Pat Utomi's book. But more importantly, the importance of telling our own story with all the nuances. In unraveling the China puzzle, Professor Jin challenges the perspectives held about China that explains its success and predicts its downfall on narrow, uninformed views. She said, this book proposes an alternative view, more nuanced, more complex, hopefully more helpful, and explain the political and cultural superstructure on which they depend, and take us away from decisions that are motivated by emotion, ideology, or politics. So you can understand why Pat Utomi's book is very important. If you listen to what this lady was saying, you will, in Pat Utomi's book, you will confront our reality, appreciate the different and more informed perspectives, and perhaps have a better understanding of state policy making and state performance under different regimes. It's worth repeating that the book is both historical, contemporary, and futuristic. As my late distinguished teacher, Professor S. Kotoya, would say, any analysis not grounded in history is ahistorical and has tainted value at best. I wondered why our nation stopped teaching history to our students. I hear some state governors have also picked that up now. They are teaching history. History is the superstructure of any society. So what did Pat do with these various epochs? There are different institutional and elite culture in each of these: military, colonial, post-military. And the contestation between the elites was very obvious in those. And the outcome of this contestation depends on the political elite legitimacy. He emphasized this point: knowledge and ideology of the bureaucratic elite expertise. I have 20 minutes in the program, so this your 5 minutes is not going to work. It's 20 minutes in the program. It's a lot of effort. It would therefore it will be worse if those political elites do not know, or their values do not align with theirs. As Pat puts it, public policy is conceived as mainly the product of competing values within the policy formulating elite in determining a particular course of action. In this contestation of power, he dwelt on the issue of legitimacy of the political elite. In his view, legitimacy is critical for power relations, for shaping policy process and policy outcomes, that even if you don't have it ab initio, you must strive to earn it. Those who are governed must believe that the ruler has what he calls a clean title to the authority. Clean title to the authority. He therefore says that legitimacy is therefore different from legality. I think given the context in which we find ourselves, where courts are beginning to make pronouncements of who governs, this very important point needs to be made, and Pat made it very eloquently. It then goes on to discuss the importance of state capacity and bureaucracy, and how even the political elite must nurture, must train, reorient the bureaucracy with certain values for performance and outcome, and to understand that the bureaucrats are not their enemies. In the colonial era, one thing was very clear: the colonialists did not come to uplift society. They came with a purpose. They had limited goals: extract, exploit, appropriate local wealth in a manner of war booty. You may not like this, but they set up institutions to achieve this goal. So it's not a question of whether it was good for us, but the lessons that are embedded in this is that when goals are set, appropriate institutions must be set accordingly. Appropriate personnel must be deployed. If Nigeria says we are eager, hungry for industrialization, how come Minister of Science and Technology, Minister of Trade and Industry, are third-rate ministries in this country. How come? The budgets do not reflect it. The appointment of ministers do not reflect that we are paying serious attention to this institution. Here was a colonial government who knew what they wanted, set a limited goals, but created institutions to attain those goals. So those are the lessons. So when institutions, when political authority creates goals, limited goals, we must begin to see them in the institutions that are being funded and in the budget appropriately. It reminds me of a couple of years ago, in the last dispensation, I was part of a retreat with a state governor after he had done 2 years. He was in his third year. And while we were at that retreat, the governor started reeling out what he wanted each sector to do. His commissioners were there, all the aides were there. After a while, I had to interrupt the governor, and I said, these commissioners and aides, you need to pull out your papers and write, because I think for the first time, they were hearing the governor espouse his programs after 2.5 years. So the goals were not set, the institutions were not appropriately put in place, and the personnel were not appropriately deployed. So these things, the absence of clear goals and direction from political authority becomes an incidental power resource for bureaucratic state. So when bureaucrats even seize control, it's also because there is no direct goals set by the political authority. And that is why it's important, as the book tries to explain, what is in a manifesto is what transforms into goals and programs that the bureaucrats are supposed to implement. When we say one thing and do another, it becomes problematic. I refer you to James Madison in 1778. He said, a good government implies 2 things. First, fidelity to the object of governance, which is the happiness of the people. Secondly, a knowledge of the means by which that object can be best obtained. This second part is very important. Even if you know that it is to generate happiness for all the people, do you know how to do it? Have you assembled the appropriate people and created the right institution? If insecurity is ravaging this country, how come we are still pouring money on the same structures that seem ineffective to deal with this? So when you read Pat Utomi's book, you begin to understand this. In the constitutional epoch, you know, the political elite, and Professor Lewis and others touched on this. This elite discord, you can see them clearly in the way they played out in Pat Utomi's book. Even in the First Republic, there was this disdain for the uneducated electorate. And yet, because constitutionally you need them, you have to curry them by any means possible. But then what people did was they resorted to extra legal means to even win an election, and they began to organize people in solidarity groups, in tribal groups. And so even from the First Republic, we have already started creating this problem, and that problem has persisted till now. The last one was on the military. And it's very interesting that Chief Philip Ashodu is here, very much implicated in the book as well, and a key player in the military. The planning, first National Development Plan, second National Development Plan, the core bureaucrats, as Pat illustrates in the book, were instrumental. They had knowledge, they had expertise. Gowon gave them room too. Gowon gave them room to exercise this authority, and they were able to come up with policies. The indigenization decree came out, the first plan came out, and there was a convergence of knowledge and ideology, even with intelligentsia. So the book illustrates how an intelligent bureaucrat can drive and make policies. When the second regime came after Gowon, there was a certain level of disdain for this bureaucratic oligarch, as they were beginning to be called. And so things were no longer at ease. And so even a program as well thought out as Operation Feed the Nation did not succeed because he had good goals, but they didn't seek advice from these knowledgeable bureaucrats who could have guided it a little better, and so it did not achieve the goals because they seized both the political authority and even the implementing authority. So this part of the book is very rich, very important, and I think we need to do that. I'll end by saying that when we talk about statecraft and state capacity, you know, if you take something as simple as industrial policy that I think we need in this country, there's no way you can drive an important industrial policy without the bureaucrats, without a statecraft. And so, Obama, in 2012, I was a visiting scholar at the Brookings Institution, and Obama gave a State of the Union address. In that State of the Union address, I began to realize that America may not have an open industrial policy, but they have industrial policy by other means. And this industrial policy is driven by statecraft capacity. Look at what Obama said. He said, I will go anywhere in the world to open new markets for American products. And by the way, this is Obama, it was public research dollars over the course of 30 years that helped develop the technologies to extract all the natural gas of shale rock, reminding us that government support is critical in helping business get new energy off the ground. This idea that government has no business in business is nonsensical. Let's be very clear. If they didn't have strong state, strong bureaucrats, this program for 30 years that produced this significant technology would not have happened. And he went on to say, in 3 years, our partnership with the private sector has already positioned America to be the world's leading manufacturer of high-tech batteries. Because of federal investments, renewable energy has nearly doubled, and thousands of Americans have jobs because of it. So, interestingly, when somebody comes here and tells you you don't need industrial policy, please remind them of Obama's State of the Union address. Need I say more? I'm concluding part. If we want to develop, we know what to do. Improve state capacity to formulate and implement policies. You have to plan. Bureaucrats matter. Have leaders with values, ambition and goals, willing to enlarge the tribe and build a nation. Correct our politics, construct elite consensus. Professor Tommy has done his bit. Let those who have ears hear. This is the end of the story. Please buy the book and read. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof.
Your Excellency Victor Atta, the members of the National Assembly, former governors, Your Excellencies, the birthday boy, Professor Tommy, our royal fathers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry that the program has changed a little bit where I have to speak. I have to rush back to the airport and catch 2 o'clock flight because I'm not as lucky as His Excellency Peter Obi to have a private aircraft that will take me back to. So I want to wish you inviting me to this event. I want to remind you, Professor Tommy, that you came into an event and you spoke at the International Institute here in Lagos on Kofa Biomi on what is wrong with Nigeria, issue of leadership. So we need to sit down and understand what is really wrong with us. So we can pick it from there. Instead of sitting down here, I see all the big men here, all the big heads, our Royal Navy students. Look at what is wrong with us and how do we go there. What's wrong with Nigeria is not so many bills. So we can sit here today And I'm sure by the time we pick this your book and read it, and pick another book that you have written and read, we will see a lot of similarities, on those books. So have we really something from America, and it will work perfectly for us as it is working for Americans? The book reviewer, when he says we have to engage the world, but engage the world with our own story. And when I say our own story, not a borrowed story. Recently, I was actually in Rwanda. And a lot of us are now commending Rwanda, commending the president, the good things that he is doing in Rwanda. Is it very popular with the West? Today it's not. But is it popular for him in his country? Is it working for his people? Yes, it is. So are we waiting for somebody to allow us to develop a democracy that is good for us? We should not. I always feel sad when I hear our people are move on. I think these are the issues that we have to do. Nigeria is so blessed. In the past, we talk about agriculture and mining that made Nigeria who it was. Later on, eventually, the onshore became a difficult, over 1 billion barrels. Of course, the popular Benue Trough that starts from Calabar and ends all the way in Gombe. And today, in that Anambra Basin alone, we have 2 discoveries, each one of them over 1 billion barrels. Something that made more and more areas in mining, some of the clean energy. The biggest of that area when it comes to batteries is lithium. Nigeria now is discovering huge lithium potentials that are there. So every time we fumble here, God opens another door. We humble here, God opens another door. So what is wrong? What is wrong is leadership. We need a president, for instance, that will come in and say, just like my brother has said, I am not going to steal. I will not allow anyone around me to steal. And if anyone around me steal, I will punish them. And it will be seen that I'm punishing them. Believe me, all the governors will stand up because Nigerian president is the most powerful president. I'm sorry I'm rushing to the airport. I thank you very much and God bless you. I don't know why you are asking me to launch a book when Peter Obi is here. So with that, there is no place that we need these books more than a state like Nasarawa that is having the great potentials for future leadership. Therefore, the Nasarawa state will launch this book with 10 million naira so we can go to
MC and welcome very eminent panel members. I'm sure we all agree with me that we have the political elites here. So if they agree to what the keynote speaker said or the book reviewer said, it means that Nigeria will be a better place. And if you look at the topic that we have today, we are looking at democracy, governance, and national performance, which is a very interesting topic and which will interest anybody that is interested in Nigeria. And the keynote speaker, Professor Lewis, mentioned that we are supposed to celebrate that we've had about 25 years of democratic governance, which is very good. However, when you now move to the governance indicators like rule of law, regulatory quality, government effectiveness, accountability, control of corruption, in all these governance indicators, Nigeria has not done well and continued to decline governance indicators. When we now look at other areas or statistics or indicators of socioeconomic development, when you look at HDI, when you look at poverty level, when you look at unemployment, when you look at insecurity, when you look at inflation, the litany goes on. Nigeria is not doing well at all. So my first question, which goes to His Excellency, the former governor of Sokoto State and current distinguished senator of Nigeria, also former speaker. I'm not sure there's any other person to answer this question than you. Given that you've traversed almost the three key areas in Nigeria: House of Reps, governorship, and now in Senate. So my question to you, which we actually alluded to, do you think that this Western-oriented democracy that we have in Nigeria is suitable for Nigeria? Or do we think that we need a Nigerian-oriented democracy? And what should it be? Thank you, Your Excellency.
Expedient for me to start by congratulating our Professor Emeritus on this very auspicious event of his 68th birthday and the leadership and membership of CVL on this 21st anniversary lecture. Prof, you have done well for this country. Our prayer is that God Almighty shall continue to give you more of His grace and many more years in good health. And all of that blessings shall be extended, of course, to your wife and members of your family. This is indeed a very important question. I recall that a few months ago, we were invited by President Olusegun Obasanjo, I thought he was going to be here, on the same topic, talking about whether the Western democracy, in this case, the presidential system of government, is working here in Nigeria. And the consensus, the common ground at that discussion was that we need to tweak and rework the system and bring it closer home. Yes, Nigeria has some similarities in terms of its diversities with America as a continent, as a country, but not everything about America is similar about Nigeria. So the presidential system of government that we've been practicing since 1979, when you compare it with the particularly parliamentary system that we have practiced from 50s up to 66, is completely different, and I believe that those who experienced the parliamentary system are saying that Nigeria was better off with the parliamentary system of government than what we have now. I believe that as someone who has been in the House of Representatives from 2003 to 2015 and who has been Speaker of that House, we have a lot of work to do to bring the realities of our situation to bear in conformity, with the presidential system of government. Of course, yes, it's not completely holistically as it is in the United States, because in the US, you don't have a Senate president. In Nigeria, you have a Senate president. So it's not completely that system that has been or is being practiced here in Nigeria. But I believe that there is a lot more to be done in terms of working the system to conform with our own realities. But even beyond that, it is also about the practitioners. We have had some gains in our electoral system in 2015. Everybody appreciated that the 2015 elections were judged to be fairly okay. What happened thereafter? 2019, we witnessed a reversal. 2023, even worse. So it is not completely about just the system. It has to do also with the people and the operators and the practitioners of the system. So we need to change our ways. We as a people who are practicing this democracy need to imbibe the virtues of those practicing democracy in the United States. The governor of Nasarawa just said it. If the president comes out to say this and that are do's and don'ts, and he lived by example, and he truly, in good conscience, lived by example, the tendency is that most people will live by that example. In 2015, the expectation was that President Muhammadu Buhari was going to fight corruption. The expectation was that Muhammadu Buhari, being a retired military general and a former head of state, was going to fight insecurity and insurgency. But what do we notice? What was the end? What was the end game? Now the expectation is that Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is going to engender very sound economic policies. What are we witnessing today? So it is not about the laws, it is not about the system, it is about practitioners. And we need to really do more in that regard.
I've also been told that, when professors listen to certain things, they want to react immediately. So Professor Chidi Onya, who is presenting the governor of Enugu State, but okay, Senator Baribe, they are all reacting to what you are saying. So I don't know. Okay, let me ask Senator Baribe. Senator Baribe, you can be described as a veteran of National Assembly. Some people are asking, are you back to National Assembly again? And I said yes. So
you can call me an indigene of the National Assembly. I've been there for a very long time. And I respectfully disagree with my friend. I have a very good friend who always says that there are no two ways of piloting a 747. There's no Nigerian way. There's a way you're trained to fly that plane. And democracy has certain simple principles, which is the person who votes, his vote must count. And that is simplicity. Once we go beyond that, then what we're doing is that we just complicate issues for ourselves. And as I'm sitting here, I can tell you, in the last election, I defeated a sitting governor because people voted for me and nobody manipulated the result. Simple. If people manipulate results and another person emerges, that person does not have what we will call legitimacy. And it is a fact of life that when you are not legitimate, it is impossible for you to engender the, I would say, the support of the populace. And what is going on today, whether it is in the state, whether it is in the National Assembly, whether it's in the presidency, is that people are adjudged not to have legitimacy. And they're finding it difficult to take that decision that Governor Sule just said, which is agree to take that difficult decision and the populace will follow you. But when the populace looks at you and knows that you're illegitimate, why would they want to sacrifice for you? And that is the bane of our system today. So I do not agree that we have to have a Nigerian system. What is a Nigerian system? Is it the one for me, an Igbo man, that we already had democracy before the white man came? Or is it the one that you will have from the Oni or the Bale or whoever who already has a system that is his own? Or is it the one for the Sultan of Sokoto or any of the emirs there who already have a different one? So if we now say get a Nigerian system, which one will you choose? Democracy is the best for every one of us. Government of the people, by the people, for the people.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think that a lot of reactions are coming from these opposing views. But let me take it to you, Professor Utomi. You've been around for so many years. And you've been fighting on. So let me rephrase it a little bit. Many Nigerians believe that our structure of governance is flawed. In line with what His Excellency said and what Senator Baribe said, what do you think about our structure of governance? Is it working? Do we need another structure? You remember that Governor Sule of Nasarawa mentioned that the Nigerian president is very powerful. There are too many powers in Abuja. The question then is that structure working? Does it relate to what His Excellency is saying and what Senator is saying? Thank you.
Yeah, but with all that power, insecurity is increasing. So what's the point of the power?
Yes.
I think that we complicate very simple things. There are basic laws of nature. If you don't follow them, things don't go well. It's simple. And one of those basic laws, as far as governing is concerned, is the subject that Senator Baribe has just spoken to, legitimacy, which is a central concept in this book. I didn't start writing this last month. Some people think because of the last election, he wrote this. Those lines on legitimacy were written in 1982, because this book just grew. Okay? Essentially, legitimacy must exist to be able to govern. Whether you are elected, you carried out a coup. Why do soldiers on coup day say that the hospitals have become consulting clinics and all of that? They are trying to earn a certain kind of legitimacy, which I call negative legitimacy. Make the people believe that, okay, he's there for our sake. Now, if there is a problem with legitimacy, people wonder, what is he really doing? Is he really there because of us? We know, even if you intimidate them with Supreme Court and all of that, they know it's a sham, it's a farce. And so they said, okay, they can't fight you. Okay, carry go, God will deal with you one day. And as they're dealing with God will deal with you someday, you need National Assembly to back some policies. National Assembly knows you are illegitimate. So what do? They ask you for money. And so Engineer Abaribe gets one bag of dollars so that he will vote for the next thing. The next guy collects back and the place is just a complete mess. You can't govern. That's what's happened to Nigeria. We've gone away from the fundamentals of how you govern. And then we get these complications. Okay.
Excellent. Secretary of the State Government, Professor Chidionya, with your experience in development sectors, unemployment increasing, and as we insecurity increasing, and most of the time the attention is to the federal government, and most of the governors always keep quiet where the blame is on the government. So my question to you is, in relation to that, do you have enough powers to govern, and what do you think about the demand for state police to address the issue of insecurity?
Thank you so much. I'll start by wishing Professor Pat Otomi a very happy birthday on behalf of His Excellency Dr. Sufficient power to be able to drive the fundamental change that they need to meet their social contract to the people. In my experience in the past, before I took this job, I had worked in the development firm for a long time, and I understand that certain fundamentals. While the politics is important, the politics of delivery is underpinned by the right policies, also having the right implementation culture. And Professor Ositobu had talked about something in his comment which talks about strong institutions. And we've been talking about this for quite a bit. So what the governor of Enugu State had done through his team was to identify that evidence-based decision-making is critical. So there's no way you're going to set out to achieve a level of very fundamental, irreversible change if you don't understand the fundamentals driven by empirical evidence. So what we have done is, while there's this question around whether the states have enough power, we are more focused on meeting the social contract that is in his agreement with the people. And what that means is that very fundamental things that came up, like for instance in Enugu, for over 2 decades, there was no water in Enugu State. But the governor, on assumption of office, said that in 180 days, and this is the difference between when governors come into power and they give some highfalutin promises that they have no plans of meeting, and those that drive their commitments based on empirical evidence on data. So what we have set out to do was to set out a trajectory that allows us to build the milestones to track performance. So now you know that strong institutions also have to do with capacity. We're very aware that the current system in the public service may not have the right capacity. So we're able to start at the very beginning to get the right support from outside to strengthen what was within, and also to track the growth of those that are within towards that key element, which was to provide water for Enugu in 180 days. And it seemed like 2 decades of problems being solved in 180 days. But at the end of 180 days, Enugu State was able to have close to 60,000 cubic liters coming into Enugu. It's never been done before, over 2 decades. But the fundamentals was that we didn't set on that journey by just giving a promise that there was no plan to achieve. So the state governors have fundamental powers. They have enough power to be able to fulfill some of the promises if they want to. It's important if they want to. So when a governor is committed to meeting his obligations, for instance, reducing the poverty headcount, which is one of the key things, you have to ask yourself what policies can actually achieve that. So if you're going to try private investors, we said we were going to move the GDP from $4.4 billion to $30 billion over the next 4 to 8 years. This is not a promise that is easy to achieve if you don't do the fundamentals, attract the private sector to drive and catalyze growth. Like I was sharing with the former governor of Akwa Ibom State, and he said to me, how do you drive this without security? How do we drive this without energy, power, which is one of the key areas that make companies not to be competitive? Why would they come to Enugu State? So the first thing he did was tackle insecurity. Now we don't have the powers, so to speak, to have state security, but we do have the powers to collaborate with existing security agencies and have the political will to do what was not easily done before. So the governor has political will. He had the right type of collaboration with security agents. He had the right type of team to drive it. Professor Tommy has been pushing value-based leadership. So at the very beginning, the governor said, what will be the core values that can help me drive the team that I have gathered? So he set out with 4 key areas. First was meritocracy. He felt that it was important to hire the right people. And so it wasn't just meritocracy of recruitment, it was also meritocracy of ideas. So the ideation and the people was one of the key things. He felt like respect was critical. The next thing was team spirit, not just teamwork, so that we work collaboratively in areas and support one another. And this is around the key things. And finally, what are we going to define success to mean to the people of Enugu State? And also create this regional market that we were pushing for. So the last was excellence. This catalyzed the process of our process from ideation to transaction close. So governors do have the power if they choose to. Thank you.
Excellent. Listening to the SSG of Enugu State, all you are saying seems as if to say you took some of the things. So we thank Professor Ostobu for that excellent book. So let me now take it back to His Excellency, Mr. Peter Obi. You were a governor and you ran for president. And this question actually relates to you and Senator Tambua. And in relation to his view and Senator Baribe's comment, I want to ask you, when you were governor, and even from your experience, when important decisions that will affect the generality of the people are being taken by the president, is there normally proper consultation with the governors, with the National Assembly, before decisions are taken? The reason why I'm asking this is because if you look at the current situation we have in Nigeria, fuel subsidy has been removed, Naira has been floated, and we are now in a very serious crisis. So my question to you, during your own time as a governor, did the president consult in this kind of important decisions? And what do the governors normally say in this? Thank you.
Number one, quite frankly, it is a difference between the different presidents. You cannot compare Obasanjo's presidency, Yar'Adua's presidency, to what we have today, period. Under General Obasanjo, the governor was in charge of the security. I, for one, requested that every DPO, for rank of DPO, to commission in Anambra be removed. And it happened. I said every DPO, I didn't say assistant commissioner, from DPO of police, that I don't want to see them in Anambra State again. That I want to have a commissioner of police. And that I am taking decision, everything that happened in security in Anambra State, including pulling people's house down, I did it with the authority of the president. And every month, there is a conversation between the president and the governor. And it happened on Yaradua. I remember telling a governor when Buhari was there, I said, how can you be arguing with people? Can't you talk to the president? He looked at me as if I was speaking. As I go to the president and request something. So there is a difference in between collaboration and authority. It's totally different. Like Sule said, if the president decides that things will work, it's like this in security. It's either you're in charge or you're not in charge. If we're at war, we declare war. When I came to Anambra State, everybody knew. People were collecting money in the street. People were doing all sorts of things. Some lunatics took over our park. I went to Obasanjo. I said, listen, if you don't want me to be governor, I go home. If I must be governor, I will be in charge here. He said, Mr. Young man, just don't do things that will be very distant. And I went home. In 1 week, they have 3 DIG of police. Okino, Ono for everybody in Anambra State. And he was shot. What I said, listen, sir, this man is problematic. We must bring everything down. So, the president has to decide whether bandits will take over the country or not. The governors have to now work with him. Governors have to be in charge of their state and hold them responsible if you want to govern. Just like what you said about corruption. The same thing. So, in my own time, I would say it, under Yaradua, under Yaradua it was even better. Yaradua asked me to go and remove a village. I said, listen, I have a problem with this village. He called the 2 governors. I said, we must demolish everything here. When I became governor, I'm happy that a revered traditional ruler of Onitsha is there. Obi of Onitsha. There was a place called Apaka Forest. That was where all the criminals are. And I said, see this forest, President, I want to level it. I don't want it to be a forest again. He said, do whatever you want. Today is the best habitable place in the area of Onitsha. We will level it. Everybody go. But the president gave us authority. He didn't say no, you have to take it easy. He said go and level it if that's what you want to do. So you need a president who is determined, gives the governor authority, the governor takes the authority and go and do it. Like Sule said, if the president decides today to stop corruption, you don't need the FCC. If you're not stealing, your wife is not stealing, your children are not involved, you reduce it by 60%. Everybody will run for cover. But when your wife, your children, everybody is doing their own, people will help them. And that's what is happening. You know? We are talking about the issue of foreign exchange. We can't just, a currency of a country is one of the things that makes that country. Today, our country has been terrorized by people in government. You put a law that if any official is here, fine with dollar, you go to jail. No more dollar transaction here. I'm not, those who are importing goods can use dollar. We have naira, we have currency, we should be proud of it. But when people in government are now the ones spending dollar, spraying it, doing everything, you hold the whole system. People used to disagree with presidents. Governor Ada is there. They were disagreeing with Obasanjo. They quarreled, and everybody, even in our meeting, I've been in a meeting where Obasanjo will end the meeting by quarreling with the governors. After quarrel, they walk away, this walk away. Today, governors can't walk away on the president because they walk away, they don't know where they're going to end. But they used to walk away on Obasanjo. Yeah, so this is the things. You must have a system that works. When they were there, Obasanjo will call meeting, they won't come. Because they believe they were system. Today it was like the governors are now household. If the president said this thing, everybody runs for cover. It shouldn't be. They are governors of their own states. And they govern their own states. Like it's in America, we borrow the democracy from them. We should practice it like them. No governor goes to take permission, shouts when Biden can say anything. You know, so these are the issues that we need to deal with. Thank you.
You know, rule of law is key to sustainable economic growth and development. And Nigeria is not doing well in that. And let me take it now to the election. So how do you assess the 2023 election? And what other electoral reforms do you think that we need to bring about better elections in Nigeria?
Well, I will attempt to answer. And when you ask my elder brother here, Peter Obi, the last question, and you indicated that I was going to make some comment. I think I will go back to that first. While in office, somewhere in 2016, we were invited for breaking a fast by President Muhammadu Buhari. And unfortunately, my colleague, who was then also the chairman of Nigeria Governors Forum, Abdulaziz Yari Abubakar of Zamfara, had traveled for Lesser Hajj. But before he did that, out of frustrations, he came out to make a public statement that he had resigned from being the chief security officer of Zamfara State. So when we were done with the breaking of fast, President Buhari was seeing us off. As I shook his hands, he asked me, looking straight into my eyes, "Why is your friend that is always complaining?" I said, "My friend had traveled to Saudi Arabia. But Mr. President, he is not just crying and complaining. There is real and present danger in Zamfara. And there is the need for you to really intervene." He's not just complaining. He said, "Really?" I said, "Yes, sir. I will allow you to interpret what that means to you." Now, my experience, whether I was being consulted on policies, Sokoto borders 3 regions, that is 3 states in the Niger Republic: Tawa, Doso, and Maradi. We have the longest border with the Niger Republic than any other state in Nigeria. When President Muhammadu Buhari decided to close down borders, no governor was consulted. 3 of the governors of those regions individually called me to say, "What's happening?" I said, "My brother, I'm sorry, I don't know." Every effort I made to reach out to the NSA, because I was told that the instruction came from the office of the NSA, I couldn't reach him. The only person I was able to reach was the then CG of Immigration, Babandede, who was able to give me some insights. So no consultation whatsoever on such a very key and important economic and security issue. Because Niger and Nigeria had by then a security pact that the military from Nigeria can pursue insurgents and bandits up to some certain miles into Niger Republic. That's what they call hot pursuit. Vice versa. And then you shut the borders. So you could see that I was left with no answers. So consultations are not necessarily as frequent as they are supposed to be. And on the issue of security, powers of the government. Yes, in terms of developmental issues in your state, yes, you have the control of the resources. You can come up with policies, but then you can only implement those policies, no matter how good, if the state is safe and secure. The all and most important ingredient for any development is security. Governors don't have control over security. They don't. They post you, Commissioner of Police, at their whims and caprices, and they deal with you and relate with you as they deem fit. So it's not about collaboration. It's beyond collaboration. Matters of security, governors are supposed to be hands-on because they are the ones dealing with the live issues of ensuring that people are secured. And it's not the case. So there is the need for us to restructure and devolve more powers to the governors so that they can work on issues of security and even give them more resources. That's my take on that.
Sorry, Frank, if you don't mind. Yeah, I think that we should not just drift away from it. There isn't enough listening, and it's one of the most important attributes of leadership. If you can't listen, you cannot lead. And then this is one of the big strengths. I mean, I keep talking to my Indian friends, I'm talking about how enough credit has not been given to Rao as Prime Minister for India's turnaround. It was supposed to be a placeholder, and the things that happened. But I bring it home, enough credit, and Nigeria is very unfortunate. It's not been given to Umaru Musa Yar'Adua as president. He was a listener. He listened to governors. He listened to even ordinary civilian like me. Once Friday afternoon, I still remember, he said to me, "What's wrong with Nigeria?" I said, "You know, I'm a teacher, I will talk." He said, "Talk." And for 2 hours, he sat there just listening to me. You know? So, we have been unfortunate, very unfortunate with losing President Yar'Adua when we lost him. But we need people who go to leadership positions to learn to listen and to consult. That's part of the essence of the policy process. And we're missing it now. This, shut down the border. Nothing, then 2 weeks later you find out, why did we shut it down? What are the consequences? We act before we think. And this is tragedy. This is what Nigeria has been living through. Just thought I should make that small point.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, for giving me this opportunity. Executive governors and former governors, Your Excellency, the former Secretary General of the Commonwealth, Chief Emeka, our traditional leaders, His Royal Highness, the Oba of Onitsha, and the representative of the Emir, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocols respected. I first should start by wishing a happy birthday to our chief host, Professor Pat Utumi, a man of shining credentials who continues to inspire Nigerians and Africans across the continent. I am deeply honored by the privilege to keynote the 2024 Center for Values in Leadership annual lecture and International Leadership Symposium. In fact, I feel very fortunate to share the podium with my good friend, Professor Peter Luis, one of the most distinguished Africanists in the United States, who's traveled to Lagos to be there in person. I also want to share the wisdom that was shared by Bishop Kuka and other distinguished speakers before him, as well as this wonderful panel of the wise. Let me say that all of the previous speakers have really dived deeply into Nigeria as we see it today. I want to stand on their collective shoulders and project from there to the outside, provide additional context for this brainstorming exercise. It is remarkable that as we gather here today to brainstorm and rub minds about the linkages between democracy, governance, visionary leadership, and development, it is projected that in less than 25 years, Nigeria's population would be at approximately 400 million inhabitants, which means that 1 in every 4 Africans would be Nigerian. It is also projected that should the Fourth Republic endure and should Nigeria stay on the trajectory of democracy, it would be the second largest populated democracy in the world by 2050, coming only after India. As we know so well, 70% of Nigeria's population is under 30 years old, and almost half is under 15 years. Nigeria, therefore, is a global player and must step up its game. Nigeria, as we all know, is the giant of Africa, literally and figuratively. It must lead the charge and cannot have feet of clay. There is now a collective awareness for those of us who follow global issues of the weight, the voice, the value of giving meaning to the global south, where increasingly populations are saying nothing about us without us. That explains the calls for reform of the UN system with a permanent seat on the UN Security Council for the African continent. That explains the call for reforms of the Bretton Woods institutions, the World Bank and the IMF. That explains even recent actions to provide an African seat on the G20 and all the echoes around that. The world is beckoning for Nigeria to tell the world that here I come. We are also gathered here today at a time when the sub-regional organization ECOWAS is in shambles. We know Nigeria's weight and leadership in the sub-region. It carries the entire sub-region in all aspects: human capital, economic powerhouse, governance model, military might, and you name the rest. Looking internally, Afrobarometer surveys and surveys by
I think there is a network election.
And I said one thing, just like I said about driving, driving was what one of the former Chief Justices spoke about an aeroplane when I confronted him. The elections, there was nothing wrong with the elections that happened in my constituency. Everything went well, except the presidential part. The same beavers, the same everything, Our results came when they wanted to impute the ones for the House of Rep and Senate. It went seamlessly, and our results were declared. When it was time to impute the one for presidential, it didn't go. Why? And somebody will tell you that it was a glitch. It was not a glitch. It was just that some people decide that they will not follow the simple tenets of democracy. That's all. And it is because of one simple thing that it happened. Nobody till today has been punished for that thing that happened. And the bane of Nigeria, and I repeat, the bane of Nigeria is that nobody is punished for any infraction, and therefore people get away with murder. That's all.
Aaron, do you disagree with him or do you agree with him on this one?
Well, I think the way he presented it, I said it's about the people, the attitude. Now, look at it. By himself, Senator Abaribe is saying that when it was time for his own election, and that of the member of House of Reps, on the same day, same process, his own went seamless. That's what my brother didn't go seamless. So it's the attitude of the people. It's the process. It's the same process. It's human being. It's about the people. It's about how we go about implementing those very important ingredients of democracy. Free, fair election. And you see, the whole of the election, the whole gamut, from primaries up to tribunal, up to Supreme Court, is a process. How can you till tomorrow convince me that someone who came fourth, number 4, can be governor? Meanwhile, the tribunal said he cannot be, the Court of Appeal said he cannot be, Supreme Court said 1, 2, no, number 1, go, number 2, not you, number 3, not you, number 4, it's you. And you tell me that it's not about human beings. It's not possible. And look at the policy of the current Supreme Court on all the governorship elections. The policy of let my people go, not justice of the case. Not justice of the case. So when we talk about due process, rule of law, it's not just about, it's a process. So I believe that we have a long way to go in the reforms, and we must imbibe the right attitude as leaders, as followers, as voters, as political parties, as practitioners. So it's not just about, look at the Imo elections, the last one, look at the Bayelsa elections, look at the Kogi elections. Okay, look at the by-elections that have just been concluded last week. In my state, people were carrying ballot boxes with the aid of police and the military. So how do you convince me that the election was free and fair? So we must get the right attitude if we want to have democracy and good governance. Thank you very much.
One is the question of the powers of the governors. And my young friend there, Peter B., had to go and take permission from the president to cut down a forest in the state. In a federation, the government coordinate, not subordinate. But in Nigeria, we make the sub-government subordinate to the center. It is wrong. We don't have a federal system. I'll elaborate in a minute. And I had to take permission. I saw the necessity to have power in this century. I had to go and take permission from a president to build a power plant. It was a hard task to get that permission. After I made a law, if you generate, you cannot distribute. So what was the point? So my effort to say that Akwa Ibom will be the first state to have 24-hour concert power was frustrated because of the nature of arrangements we have in the country. Like you said, if that man, Governor Tambuwal, if that man, that police officer that you said was aiding the cutting away of Baloba, if he was from your state, he would not have aided it, because he would have made sure that the people's choices are what comes out as the result of the election. And you talk about election and INEC, how many times have we not said? They say if you are alleged, you must prove. So you bring somebody who says that his election results were faulted, you bring him to come and prove with evidence held by INEC that will convict INEC. Why will INEC release those the kind of evidence he needs? When President Trump had issues with the election, nobody asked Biden or anybody to come and prove that they were properly elected. They asked Pennsylvania and Georgia to go and do a recount. But here we have never put INEC on trial until you put INEC, who alleges that they've done a proper election, until you put them on trial to come and prove how properly they conduct the election, you'll never get good results from the election. So what is fundamentally wrong is what the institution, I thank the book reviewer for talking about the institution. Our institution, and the most basic, corrupt, wrong institution we have, is the Constitution. Unless and until we develop the courage and the ability to change that Constitution and make it a Constitution written by Nigerians for Nigeria, we will never make progress. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I think my issue is essentially on the question which the compere asked about the type of government. I want to say that the problem, as has been said, is not with the system of governance. Look, we once operated the parliamentary system. We said it was not good. We have come to the presidential system, and we are now saying it's not good enough. If we go to test, the problem is not with the system. Actually, what we are practicing now is pseudo. Not democracy, though. It's not the real democracy. We are practicing what somebody said, a government of the elites, by the elites, for the elites. Somebody decides Western democracy when we are the ones who are not practicing it. My point is, we need to bring this check and balance, which is consequence for action. And if we can't do it through the established institutions, I don't know how else we can do it. Thank you.
I think we have been talking about the problems and going round and round about the problems. We have never suggested how they could be solved. Maybe doing a blame game, but we have never talked about how to solve these problems. There's a fundamental, and that fundamental problem is the relationship between he has to be powerful. He's the #1 citizen of the country. But the problem is his relationship of his power to the governance of the state through different organs and different institutions in place in the country. So who will bear the cat? Who will come out and bear the cat? When we were forming the People's Democratic Party in 1998, and we look at all these problems and say who will bear the cat? And the solution among us that it is the party. It is the party that must be supreme. And we worked to make the party supreme in 1999 by using the party to choose good people who will, I mean, we have come here, this is an opportunity. We won't have to say. We'll take power back to the people through the committee of PDP, in which we were all members as members of the